welcome back to another video feature of the Immersive Worlds Handbook. If you had a chance to hear that voice announcement just a second ago outside the Pavilion of United Arab Emirates, perhaps you have a sense of a clue as to what this video feature is focused on. That specific voice was mentioning the fact that the wait for the pavilion at that time of the day, which was mid-afternoon, was around 3 hours. And one of the things that was so predominant for me as a guest and an analyst of the Expo was the fact of the crowds. The fact that so many people were at the Expo. As you can see here, and it could be really any pavilion, large or small, one is confronted by the sheer number of guests. Certainly nothing on the scale of what transpired at the Shanghai Expo. Estimates of the Expo in Milan suggest 20 million people perhaps will visit, and we'll have to see at the end of October 2015 indeed what the numbers turned out to be. If you compare that to Shanghai in 2010, over 70 million people visited. And even though this looks crowded here, in Shanghai there were reports of lines for pavilions as long as 8 hours long. The longest here, I think, tended to be around 3 hours. Myself, I got pretty lucky and didn't have to wait more than an hour in some cases. Now this is a shot here, three still images of the crowds queuing early in the morning. Typically on my visit to the Expo, I would get there an hour ahead of time, and in some cases, depending on which of the two gates I entered through, they would let the crowd in upwards of 30 minutes, in some cases 35 to 40 minutes early, but still quite a monumental challenge in terms of keeping your patience and being able to get around and see the kinds of things that you want to see depending on your itinerary. So in this video feature, I want to focus on the dynamics of the crowd and specifically get into some of the issues that I noted on site, as well as bring in some videos about some other aspects of crowds and crowd control that are common to an expo like this in Milan. See some of that crowd now waiting for the entrance to the Italian Pavilion. I mean, it stretches back all the way beyond, and then it forks around here. Once you actually go in, there's quite a bit of wait as you go through the inside and then up the stairs, so a long line. So just as we look through the Expo, you know, one of the themes we're talking about here is the social forces and how you control the social forces. And of course, this has always been a concern for not just World Expos, but a concern for parks like Central Park, if you think about the design, and of course theme parks. And so I would certainly say that one of the powerful forces that influences the theme park of the present from the World Expo tradition is this control of social forces. And I have to say that the first hour or so being here was dominated by just trying to queue through lines and so forth. So it's certainly one of the things that we can learn from the Expo. Okay, and we can take an opportunity now to focus a little bit in terms of the issues that we've been talking about, crowds and so forth. We can take an opportunity here to address something very simple, but something incredibly complex, and that is the official map of the Expo. We can think of other maps, theme park maps, and make comparisons. We can think of subway maps and think about how much effort goes into planning an effective subway map, whether it's that of London, St. Petersburg, New York City, Washington, D.C. In the case of creating a map for the Expo, of course, you have different goals, but one of the clear goals is to give the guest, in a very easy overview, a sense of where everything is. And I'll try to use the secondary camera here, because I'm making a lot of noise on the video, but I'll try to show you some of this. And indeed, as you know, a traditional theme park map, you have everything laid out fairly traditionally for the guest. Again, you get the sense of the two main axes of the Expo space, where we get the, I guess that would be the north and south axis, is when we get to the Italian area that has the regional pavilions. For the most part, you're going this way and this way, back and forth. And as I mentioned in some other videos, there is a transportation system, and you see that indicated with the buses right on the outskirts of the Expo space. Originally, that was the canal space, and the canals were going to take people all the way around, and I think it would have been quite dramatic if you imagine people would have been traveling in these little boats, you know, a la the Venetian Las Vegas and so forth, right? So didn't happen as planned. Okay, so a traditional map then, you have all the pavilions listed here. You have the clusters in various locations. There's a legend here, so if you're looking for ATM, lost and found, first aid, pedestrian entrance, those are all indicated as we would expect on a traditional map. Down here is pretty useful. A feast of cultures, populations, and tastes. So breaks for families, light and healthy, sweet temptations, and so forth, coffee breaks. So this is very useful because it's organized by theme or interest, and so therefore you could find it. Traditional grid system on a map, so you go from C10, for example, to find something that's listed below here. You also have at the bottom then, if you want to find Nepal or Sudan, it's listed, the coordinates are given to you, and you can also then find that on the map. Up here, they list the 9 clusters, right? And if you watch my cluster videos, you get a sense of what those are like. And then also at the top, this is, I think, very useful, what to expect at the Expo. It talks about the countries, the clusters, the civil participants, civil society participants, thematic areas, and so forth. Also indication of where street food is found. So that's on the front side. On the back, I talk about this in a feature about architecture. And so this describes in particular the thematic areas, specifically the clusters. This has a map of the surrounding area, so useful information for transit, metro, etc. The official partners, all the logos, of course, that sponsors expect to see at the bottom of the map, pretty predominant. And then this is, I think, what is quite interesting, is the trip around the world and the architecture of Expo. And this for me was exciting, and you could see it there, all the icons, because basically this allows the guests to iconically to see a particular structure and say, oh, that's the icon for China, that's the icon for Nepal, and then as a result of that, they can find that it makes a memorable impression. And this is what goes back to the tradition of the Expos all the way back to 1893, the World's Columbia in Chicago, and before that. Because one of the traditions was to say, can we associate a particular country, a nation, a culture, its people with a particular style? And in some cases, these are more postmodern. In the case of, say, Vietnam, a little more traditional. So this, I think, also was an interesting inclusion here on the map in terms of the Expo. Now, again, overall, all this combined, the whole point of a map is to orient the guest in space, and this certainly is the case in a theme park tradition as well. If a guest can find his or her way in that space, that's going to help with crowd control, interestingly enough. It's going to help in terms of moving and queuing people. Now, there aren't any guides, per se, that I've seen that talk about, much like you'd maybe get at a theme park, that would say, here's a strategy for visiting these pavilions first and these later in the day to think about maybe dispersing that crowd. The one exception to that would be the app, and the app certainly has information there that can be helpful for the guest in terms of maybe dealing with some of the lines in the crowds. So a little bit of a reflection here on the map at World Expo 2015 in Milan.
Yeah, so in this section I want to focus a little bit, as you can see the crowd behind me inside the Azerbaijan Pavilion, on the control of traffic basically at World Expos, the focus on the social dynamics of trying to basically control crowds and to get people to interact and so forth. Okay, so the scene here of serenity and tranquility, as I shift the camera around, is not necessarily the scene you see at the rest of the Expo. And this is my 4th day at the Expo, and one of the things that I've been reflecting on is just how incredibly crowded it is. And again, if you expect over 20 million people in the 6 or so months in which the Expo is happening to visit, you certainly would expect long crowds. But I have to say I was lucky to get into the Italian pavilion when I did, first thing in the morning. Almost sprinted over here because right now the line is probably a half mile long. And so that's, I think, one of the things in visiting an expo like this that you recall, maybe not unlike a theme park, as we look at some more of the wonderful green space here at the expo. One of the things you think about, certainly, is crowd control and queuing, and this goes back to Coney Island, where you certainly had crowds even larger, on a larger scale than what you see here at the expo in Milan. But I think it's an important thing to think about in terms of design of attractions. You think about the throughput. Some of the pavilions, I think, are quite clever in how they approach the design and moving crowds through and minimizing the time that you wait in the line, or trying to at least give you the illusion of such. But you know, one thing that you see less of here in terms of the queues, you don't have as much emphasis on interactivity or games, the kind of things you see at a lot of theme parks today. And you know, maybe because it's a short period in which the expo is taking place, that isn't as important, you know, that lack of permanence that you have at a theme park. But I think it's something missing that could give the guest an opportunity to enjoy the time or to pass the time more, because it does sometimes take a while to get through the various attractions. You could wait hours upon hours. But overall, I think they've done a great job in terms of creating queuing systems, giving people enough to do. With the smaller villages, you can certainly visit some of those in the clusters and avoid the big attractions like the Italian pavilion behind here, which again has a wait probably upwards of 2+ hours. So I hope you enjoyed this video feature, and please come back for additional video features of the Immersive Worlds Handbook.